And we ready, Brandon? I guess we are.
Yep.
All right. Good evening, Facebook world and podcast folks. Time for another episode of Things My Mother Never Told Me.
All right.
Say hey, Tanya.
Hey, everybody, help me. Hey.
We got another one, our special guest. The family is deep. It's deep. Mr. Kevin Lewis. Tanya, go ahead and read that bio. We're going to read your bio.
Okay.
And then we're going to get into this thing, let you tell the story.
All right, everybody. Welcome Kevin Lewis, who is an Associate Director of Equity at Work at Beloved Community, a racial and economic justice consulting firm where he provides strategic consulting and training on racial equity and sustainable change for organizations. Kevin has a professional background in higher education, nonprofit DIE facilitation, and social justice curriculum training design. He came to his current role at Beloved Community because he found a deep alignment between Beloved's values and his personal and professional values rooted in equity and liberation. Kevin has demonstrated his passion for facilitation through presenting for global audiences in Canada, Australia, and the US. He holds a BS Ed in Human Development and Family Studies from Bowling Green State University and an MSN in Higher Education Student Affairs from Indiana University. Kevin is a proud native of Detroit and currently lives happily in New Orleans. All right, let's welcome Kevin Lewis.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, how you doing?
Pretty good. I mean, hearing a bio read back to me, I'm like, I only, hear bios from like really important people doing really important things. So I was like, okay, I have a little short bio. I've done a few things.
Yeah.
That was good to hear. But I'm doing good. I'm good.
All right. Yeah, because you're an important person and you're doing some important things. So
Thank
you know.
you.
But the thing is that a lot of times we because we're doing it, we don't see it like we see what everybody else is doing. Yeah, that's cool.
Mhm.
So real quick, where'd you go to high school?
I went to the one and only, the number one high school in the city of Detroit, Renaissance High School.
He gonna say Renaissance.
Okay.
School of the Mighty Phoenix. I was gonna still cast sex slogan and be like second to none, but I don't even want to bring that into the space. I went to Renaissance.
Okay. See, the reason why she said, "Oh boy," is because most of our guests, through well, we didn't do it on purpose. Most of our guests went to Cass.
Okay, wait, did either of y'all go to Cass?
I did.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my parents went to Cass too.
I know. And my son went to Cass.
Yeah, it's a divided house because my older brother, we both went to Renaissance, but then my younger brother ended up going to Cass. I'm like, where did you go wrong? Like, where did we go wrong with you? Like following the Cass tradition. I didn't like that. I'm glad that you all decided to finally have a Renaissance person on here.
It was an accident. No, because Philip went to Renaissance, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was on here.
Okay. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I followed you to high school, followed you on the podcast. It's fine.
There you go. All right. So what we want to do is that you do work with equity, diversity, inclusion, that sort of thing. What got you started on that journey?
Yeah, I think my journey really started in undergrad, going to a predominantly white institution. I think that's where I really began to get exposed, right, to what it meant to be Black in all white spaces. What did it mean to really go through like developmentally, like 18, 19, 20 years old. But I also went to school around the time of the killing of Trayvon Martin, the murder of Trayvon Martin. So at the time that I was in undergrad, I was working through a lot of complex feelings of like anger, but like fear, but also like rage and joy for finding like my people in college. And so in undergrad, I really became passionate about organizing and activism. And so I became president of Black Student Union, really became passionate about like raising consciousness around Black issues, particularly for Black students, really organizing with like Latino Student Union and all these other groups of like marginalized folks. And then from there, it just really took me to really thinking about in what ways do I want to contribute to building a more equitable world? Like what's in the locus of my control? Like I had that thought in undergrad, at a very small scale.
Yeah.
And that just led me into higher education because I was like, I don't want future Black students. I want them to have a space to feel enraged, right, about what we're seeing in the country.
Yeah.
And so that led me into higher ed and working with students of color and student support services. But then I was like, I don't know if higher ed is really where I feel like I can make the most impact in terms of like my passion.
Yeah.
And so that led me into nonprofit work, working K through 12 education, but really working to facilitate conversations for grades 6 through 10. Because another part of it is sometimes I don't feel like we're having these conversations young enough.
Yeah. Without doubt.
And so after that work, again, this urging of like, where do I want to make the most impact? Where am I most passionate? And that led me to Beloved, which is a beautiful organization that focuses more on organizational culture, right? Organization shifts.
Okay.
What are people actually experiencing in the workplace? How do we make systemic change? How do we move from these performative DEI things like Bath and Body Works candles, right? During Black History Month. Like, how do we move past that to being really intentional about how do we build equity into how we're paying people, specifically Black and Brown people?
Yes.
So that's kind of like a short sort of like, I started with activism in undergrad and it's led me to kind of full circle of like, how do we just like think more systemically about change?
Yeah.
So that way, we're making sure that our Black and Brown people are being taken care of in these workplaces that can be really traumatic for a lot of people.
Right, without a doubt. And that's so how long have you been on that journey? You say you started undergrad, but where you are now, how long?
I guess professionally, this is my third job. I'm a youngin, in the workplace. So I've been on a journey in terms of nonprofit work for about almost 4 years now. Higher ed, I was in there for about a year, and then I had my master's, which is another 2 years. So I said like this journey, from between undergrad and now has been about almost 10 years trying to figure this all out. Yeah.
That's a nice start of a journey.
Yeah.
Especially navigating to finding where exactly you can fit in and do the most good.
Yes.
Because we had another guest on. She actually was working at a university down in Florida, and she was working at one time with the Black Greeks. So trying to help them with inclusion and diversity. Then she did some other stuff, and then she transitioned from there to working with governmental agencies, city government, that kind of thing. And I think now she has her own business where she teaches it, because it's just like you were saying, it's just so much that you got to navigate through.
Exactly.
And being a person of color, dealing with those issues, it kind of gets very frustrating very quick.
It can be fatiguing for sure. It can be. I was just talking about that earlier when we were facilitating for a group of Black and Brown leaders that are leaders in organizations, and we were just having an open conversation about how exhausting it is and how exhausting it can be to be a person of color in the workplace. Let alone a person of color in this country, always having your identity debated, always having your identity some source of a hot topic or like some sort of like law being enacted, trying to revise history, when you're directly impacted by it. It can be, it can be exhausting.
Right, and everybody trying to tell you how you should feel.
Yes.
Yeah, real quick story. When I was my freshman year in college was when Roots came out.
Oh.
And, the group of people that I came up with, we were not militant, but we definitely were into Black power, Black, that sort of thing. And when it came out, I told all my friends, we were at Western Michigan University, which is again predominantly white institution. It was just out of 30,000 students, only 2,000 were Black. I told all my friends, don't watch it. I said, I'm not going to watch Roots. Y'all shouldn't watch Roots. And they were, you crazy? Because I understood by watching that and getting exposed to the reality of it, that I was going to be angry. And everybody that after the first episode, everybody I know was angry, and they didn't want anybody that wasn't Black saying anything to them because they were just getting ticked off. So it puts us in a space that, and we're the ones that have to be careful what we say and do. So I'm gonna jump around real quick. So you did some facilitating with global audiences, Canada, Australia. What was that like, and how did that come about?
Yeah. My last job was an organization that was actually founded in Australia. Now, I don't know how it's funny because like when I first heard about the job, I thought it was fake, like a scam or like one of those robot things. 'Cause, like Australia, like, okay, really, like there's a job I'm going to be working that is founded in Australia. But
that angle, I know.
It was a real job, y'all. I was there for 2.5 years.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so because it was founded in Australia, they were pretty much trying to take their curriculum around identity, around diversity, cultural competence. They were trying to take their K through 12 curriculum and expand it into the US, Brazil, Canada. So I worked in the US hub. And that meant traveling to Canada a lot to facilitate for, grades 6 through 10. I facilitated in Australia for them. And yeah, Australia is different. I don't know if y'all been to Australia, but
so you literally had to go to Australia to do the facilitation. It wasn't okay. No, I've never been to Australia, never been that far. No.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all like planes, but like 17 hours on a plane. It was a lot. You're shaking your head like could not be me.
No.
It was, Australia's a different places on the other side of the world, but that also, I think, because of where they're situated and who is in Australia, right? Mostly white folks and people of Asian descent. I think their ideas about race are so different from us, that it took a lot of work to facilitate conversations about identity, facilitate conversations about what it means to be a person of color to white Australian students, because their concepts of race is very much around like Indigenous Australian.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Like it's not, here we have a lot of different ways that we think about race. In Australia with those students and just the relationship between like Indigenous Australians and white Australians is just so complex that it was definitely different. Like their ideas about, race and identity and schooling for their children is very different. So I'm glad I was able to go. I don't think I would have ever been in Australia if it wasn't for me working for that organization. Like I don't like why would I, beautiful place, but my mom would have been like, what are you doing? So yeah. It was a learning curve for me for sure to talk about race, but in a way that is not US focused.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did that kind of allowed you to, well, let me answer this question, not as a statement, it's almost a statement. So was it less personal dealing with them and their racial issues than ours?
That's a good question. I want to say it was less personal. I think there were times where I was definitely frustrated of like, why don't you get this? Like, but also understanding like in a different continent country, like their politics around race are just going to be different from ours. Yeah. So I think there's a certain level. Oh, let me say this. I think what was most frustrating sometimes would be the color blindness, right? Of it all. Of like in Australia, we don't have those race problems, pretty much like we all get along, like healthcare is great. Like we have all these systems that are far more advanced in the US. So I think because a lot of Australians were maybe socialized in a way to not see race and not see color, because literally like they may not be exposed to people with brown skin at all. Sometimes it felt very personal and I had to kind of like do the inner work to be like, okay, Kevin, different context. This doesn't take away from what you know and what you have experienced as a Black person in America. You're just facilitating a different type of conversation. So yeah, I think there were personal frustrations I had, but I just had to kind of like take a step back and do the inner work to say, how do you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion with high school students in Australia, but still take care of yourself at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Without getting too frustrated.
Right. And so did that experience help you in your journey here?
I think so. I think that experience, I think working there and working, in Canada and Australia, I think it definitely opened my eyes to what is possible. I guess I'll say that. I think to this idea of like things that my mother never told me. I think it's less about what she didn't tell me and more so about what the experiences that I did not necessarily think were available to me growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from Detroit, right? A lot of people don't leave.
Right.
We don't really talk. Growing up, I always thought that to travel internationally meant that you had to be rich, like you had to have a lot of money, you had to go to private school, you were going to country day, I just didn't really know what was possible, what capacity I had to be able to one day be able to travel internationally for work and do what I love to do internationally. So yeah, it definitely kind of exposed me to I think how capable I can be with the right resources and the right access. And this goes for a lot of people. This goes for a lot of people, especially our Black and brown youth. The power in just having access, right? And exposure and resources really shows you what you're capable of. And, that's why we talk so much about access at work, especially in schools with our Black and brown youth. So I didn't know what was accessible to me, but going there and experiencing different kinds of contexts, I was like, oh, this is what is possible, right? I can talk about this stuff in Australia and it still be successful.
Okay, right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because I guess that, what's the biggest issue or roadblock to Black folks' success outside of what they may think is the fact that a lot of stuff is not available or accessible to us for whatever reason. Because sometimes, a lot of times, it's because the majority folks don't make it available, but there are other times because we don't realize that it's there.
Yeah.
Just take the pandemic, for instance, with our children. Like you said, they were given computers, but then, like you said, some areas didn't have Wi-Fi. You know what I'm saying? And our children, you know what I'm saying? And we're so used to not having these things that our parents, they were relaxed about, because first of all, they couldn't even believe it.
Right. Right.
They was up there saying, really? Now how do I use it now that I got it? How do I, you know what I'm saying? We so not used to it. We used to the schools and all that. And we just don't have the resources that the others that have.
And then when they become available, some people don't take advantage of because they're not used to having it, so they don't want to even be bothered with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a good point. And like we talk a lot about, this idea of equality versus equity and how they are very different. And so what you're talking about is like, at a school gives everyone laptops or like everybody an iPad or something like that. Like everyone gets the same device, but like, when you tell them to like take it home or whatever, they might not have access to Wi-Fi because of whatever reason. Or we talk all the time about like how equity is so much about how you need to really center the needs of people, how you really need to understand what barriers people are facing, right, for access, because then it just becomes equality, and equality can lead to a lot of gaps, and that's why it's like when we look at, disproportionate academic success, I guess you could say, it needs to take into account people's context. It can't just be, well, I gave everyone an iPad, you're not logging in. It's like equity is like, okay, well, let's talk about what's going on at home. Let's talk about access to Wi-Fi. Let's talk about what's in the neighborhood. Let's talk about if this child is actually a caretaker. Because we forget, that kids in other ways, can be caretakers. And so, yeah, I just love that point, because it just makes me think how much we need to be clear about making a distinction when we talk about access, making a distinction between equality and equity, because they're very different things.
Yes, yes. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were involved in that situation where
Oh,
we
yeah.
were there, and they would do, parents had to come and picked up the laptops that they were distributing, and then it was like, so where did they go from here after that?
Right. Right.
You know what I'm saying? And
And
they-
even the ones that didn't never came and picked them up,
yeah.
because they
That's
were
a whole question. Why?
right when we were there. There was a whole room full of iPads or tablets
Mhm.
that were still there, and they said these parents had not come and gotten these tablets.
Yes,
And so they had open date on the weekend for them to come, but then, and in order for them, once they came, then they had also had the ability, because somebody had partnered with them. I can't remember who it was. That was providing internet access,
Mhm.
but you had to come in and get the tablet.
Exactly.
And then sign up for the internet access. And you know how we are in our community. They don't even want to fill out a census form. So they don't want you to know anything else about you.
Right. Right, exactly. So the question should have been, like, if you're noticing that people aren't picking these up, the question is why. How do you get feedback, to really learn about people's experiences? Because now we're talking about lack of transportation access.
Right.
If you're not providing, I think something that happens a lot with well-intentioned organizations and schools is that, in that instance, is that they'll stop with, okay, we notice that these certain parents, and it's often parents of color, right?
Right.
These parents of color are just either too lazy or they don't care about the iPad, when really the question should be about access and whether the school is actually providing something to mitigate that barrier. Because if it is transportation, or if it is the hours, you could be like, oh yeah, you can only pick up laptops between 1 and 5 p.m. As if people don't work, So
Yeah.
Right.
it's like, that's how we get into like these ideas about stereotyping people, and these ideas about like racism rooted in individual actions, when we should be talking about systemic racism, right? Like the issues of access that are so interconnected.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So you're looking at your journey.
The
So
struggle
you
continues.
went to Bowling Green.
Yes.
How was that?
Bowling Green, I love my alma mater. I definitely think that I would not be who I am without Bowling Green. That was another experience, again, to this idea of like access and not knowing what was possible sometimes growing up, is that I went to Bowling Green for free. Like I didn't have to pay anything.
Yeah.
And that was something that, like, again, I wasn't even going to apply for the scholarship program. To your point that you were talking about earlier, like I didn't even want to apply because I didn't think that was something that was for me, that I can that can happen in my lifetime. Because again, you hear about, like, it's one thing to go to college, right? But then
Yes.
to know that you're gonna have to like take out all these loans, and we all know that loans in a lot of other ways are just like Black and brown people are just disproportionately impacted, right? But I was not even going to apply to this scholarship because I already had in my mind that I wasn't gonna get it. So I literally waited until the week of, and again, it gives me chills thinking about the fact that I was not about to do this, but that's how deep, right, this socialization thing goes.
Right.
When you deserve something, or you don't think that it's possible. Some youth don't fill out the essay part of their scholarships and whatever. I can go on about that. But anyway, so I applied for the scholarship, and that's what really sealed my deal with Bowling Green, was like, okay, like I have to take advantage of this because I don't want my parents coming out of pocket. I don't want them paying for anything. And because of that scholarship program, it connected me to so many other resources on campus. And then I connected with, some of my best friends that I still have to this day because of Bowling Green. And because even though I was in this predominantly white space, the community of Black students there were so strong. And sometimes I'm like, I hate sometimes that as Black folks on PWIs and all these campuses, a lot of the things that bond us are like terrible things that happen to us. But I I am deeply grateful for like my experience at Bowling Green because of the people that I've met, the people I still talk to, but also because it was my real launching pad to be able to have these kind of conversations and really figure out what I'm passionate about and also really be challenged in it. I had a lot of growing up to do. Like when I went to Bowling Green, I realized I had a lot of growing up to do for sure. But yeah, it wasn't easy. But it was the launching pad I really needed for sure.
Okay. Well, obviously you were up to the task.
Yeah, right. I mean, with the support of a lot of people, church included.
Yeah.
Winning that New Prospect scholarship was also nice. I went to Bowling Green.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Cool. And so then you went to Indiana. You went to IU for your master's.
Are you familiar with IU? Like, are you like?
I'm not intimately familiar with it,
Yeah.
but I'm allegorically. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
I say I got big words. I know all these words.
I know.
So
Now that he a college student again.
Okay. Right. Those essays and those papers,
Oh, yeah.
Got you in the dictionary, the thesaurus.
Oh yeah, you build your vocabulary real quick.
Right.
but Indiana in and of itself historically has what word should I use? A shadow, I guess, when it concerns race relations. But I found out, we had a guest on here that her great great grandfather was a freedman, and he actually made his way to Indiana.
Interesting.
Right, and so some of the stories you hear about Indiana and the stuff that we see about how undiverse of a place it is. That struck me as kind of strange when she was telling us that. So what was your experience at IU?
Yeah, undiverse. That's not a lie. That's not a lie. That is not a lie. I mean, yeah, we like to talk about, Michael Jackson and Jackson 5 are from Gary, Indiana, like whatever. But where I was, it was a campus, it was a college town. I am grateful that I was there for school. Because again, like Bowling Green, I had a very structured, specific group of Black people that I plugged into, and that like really made my experience what it was. Now, being in Indiana was not great because of what you're talking about. Like there are a lot of racial dynamics in Indiana. There are a lot of smaller towns. Like I remember like specifically when I first got to Indiana, so Indianapolis, there are Black people there. So I felt safe going to Indianapolis, but between Indianapolis and Bloomington, which is where I went to IU, it's about a 45-minute gap. But in order to get to Indianapolis, you have to pass through a town called Martinsville. And so when I first moved there, they were like, so, Black people looking out for Black people. They were like, Kevin, when you're driving through, you're going to pass through Martinsville. Just make sure you go the speed limit. I mean, this is also something my dad used to tell me, right? But like, just make sure that you are watching it. Make sure you're not driving too late because Martinsville was a sundown town, right? So like, when the sun goes down, make sure you're not around kind of thing. Right. And a lot of people told me that it still kind of is. So I think Indiana for me in particular was like, it was just different. It was a different feel. I felt more afraid, I think, sometimes than like I would have liked to admit at that time.
Right.
Traveling and also like, Ohio's a little different. Ohio was an hour. I mean, Bowling Green, there's Bowling Green, Toledo, Detroit.
Right.
I was 5 hours away, 5.5 hours away. Don't know anything about Indiana. But I think IU in and of itself, they have a lot of work to do with their diversity in terms of like what it looks like, but also like just making sure that, people feel safe in the surrounding areas, if you're a person of color. So, but I think in terms of the community I built, again, friends that I'll probably call friends forever because just I think, especially in undergrad and grad school, I mean, you're going through similar experiences, you're connecting over, being in this program or writing papers as you probably know right now, writing papers together, doing things. And so I think my experience at IU is definitely like a little complicated for me. because again, I was coming from one PWI where I was feeling a lot of complex feelings around like Trayvon Martin, and then like, I mean, the killings kept happening, right? So I was
Right.
already dealing with a lot of racialized like issues, and then I end up in Indiana. So it was tough, but I'm just glad I found community.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and it's amazing because I'm still amazed at some of the stuff that went on during my youth when it comes to racial equity, inclusion, whatever you want to call it, and I'm a few years ahead of you. We are, and
a few.
Yeah, just a few, and that you would go through the same type things,
Same stuff.
but then when we broach the issue in a public forum, they want to say that stuff don't exist. It ain't real.
Yeah. What parallels do y'all feel like you see between what we're seeing today, like what maybe my generation, right, like 20, 30, like what do you see? Because you mentioned Roots being out, and I think that's similar to like some of the shows that come out now where we're like, we're not going to watch that, that's too much. But are there other things that y'all have experienced, like, you know, when you were younger, that you're like, oh, this is exactly what they're experiencing today?
Oh, I mean, well, the issue that you just said about like going from Bloomington to Indianapolis, for us, like I went to Western.
Kalamazoo, yeah.
Right, Kalamazoo. Okay, so from Detroit to Kalamazoo, 2 hours, 2.5 hours back then, we had to pass through a little town called Marshall. And Marshall at one time, so we're told, was where the Grand Dragon of the Klan lived.
Wow.
And so Marshall was one of those towns that we were cautioned to not stop there. If you got to get gas or you're hungry, don't stop in Marshall. Go to drive on, get to the next town, get the boat, get to Battle Creek, but don't stop there. And so when you said that, it's the idea that even now there are certain places when you get outside of major metropolitan areas where it's not a safe feeling for somebody of color to be on the road, because like you better drive the speed limit right there, or don't let the sun go down on you while you're coming through there, because you never know what's going to happen. And that's the stuff that we see in all these old movies, they call me Mr. Tibbs and all that stuff, where it's not safe for us to be out there, no matter who we are. And like you said, when you look back on it, you realize how safe you didn't feel. Back then, you didn't want to admit it because, macho.
Right.
But when you think back on it, we can be macho all we want, but 50, 60, 10, 12 guys coming at you, that macho ain't gonna help you.
No, it's, that masculinity, that macho, this is not.
It's more likely to get you in trouble.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think that incidents like that where we still, there are places that we as people of color, we go that we don't feel comfortable. That we should be able to go anywhere we want to go and not have to be a community of Black folks there for us to be comfortable. So so that kind of thing is what I see the parallel.
I went to Eastern, so it was a lot of Black folks there, a lot of Black Greeks, a lot of everything. So and we always traveled in groups. So
right. But the sad part is, not too far from there, there were little communities like Ann Arbor. When we were in school, Ann Arbor wasn't the place where Black folks wanted to really be. No. If you didn't go to U of M or was it was an athlete, that wasn't a very welcoming place. It's better now, but there's still, so there are still pockets. And the Midwest.
It's not hidden either.
Right. They in the South they talk about, because it was known. But up here,
try to hide it.
Yeah, they don't even try to hide it. Only in the big cities, but when you get outside and we're still in the Midwest, so we got a lot of farmland, a lot of rural areas that are off the radar.
Yeah, and that's scary for a lot of people. Like all this farmland. Yeah, the Midwest, the North, trying to make it seem like we were so post-racial, like at a time is definitely false. A lot of stuff was going on up here in the Midwest.
Right. Exactly. And so that's why I like it that young people like yourselves are still working to fight this battle of information, because that's really what it boils down to is
Mhm.
providing information so that we can have dialogue. Because I know the beloved community now that the leadership, the predominance of that group is majority population there, isn't it?
Beloved community, no, we're majority Black.
Yours is okay.
One of the reasons why I joined, you
Okay.
know, that we don't bend to like what white people think we should be doing, you know, like we don't really we really do censor Blackness
Mhm.
in what we do. And so, but beloved community, like outside of the organization I work for, you know, was we really get that from like Martin Luther King's sort of like beloved community politic around like
Right.
we need to bring us all in
Yeah.
to make some change. But yeah, like no, we're not. We're most of us are Black.
Good. Well, that's good. That's good because otherwise, how can you present your platform?
Yeah,
If
right,
if it ain't you presenting the platform.
right.
So then your journey took you down to New Orleans.
Yes.
And so how is the tie-in?
Yeah, I don't know how I ended up here, to be honest. Like I don't know. It was random. I was like, you know, I've never been to New Orleans before moving here. I think I visited once on a school trip.
Mhm.
But I think I wanted to branch out of the Midwest
Okay.
because Detroit obviously then was in 2 Midwestern schools. And then I decided to apply, you know, in different places. And a lot of them were Midwest. And I was like, you know, how can I push and challenge myself to have a completely different experience, you know? And that is something that I will say my parents really pushed me quite young to really think about is like, how can I have more, especially when I was in high school, like how can I really push myself past the fear of like staying home
Yes.
and create a new experience for myself, you know, because at the end of the day, I knew my family was always going to be supportive. So yeah, I pushed myself to apply to Tulane down here, Tulane University down here, got a job. And now I'm here in New Orleans 5 years later. I told myself, I was like, I'm going to go to New Orleans for 2 years, you know, have a good time. I'm 23 years old, like at the time. I just want to have a good time. And then I want to go back to school 2 years later. That did not work out. You know, other plans happened. And yeah, I just ended up falling in love with the city, and I ended up falling in love with, and the other reason why I moved here was that it's a majority Black city.
Mhm.
I was very intentional and clear with myself that wherever I left IU, I was going to be in a space of community. I was going to be in a space where I felt affirmed, where I felt safe, where I felt like I can grow in a way that, because I like to say I'm growing up in New Orleans because I'm really learning a lot now, you know.
Mhm.
I'm really learning a lot around what it means to be on my own because I don't have any family from here. You know, I didn't know anybody before moving to New Orleans.
Oh wow.
Okay.
I really wanted to, I wanted to push past the fear of it all, of like being in a new place, learning more about who I am as a person, as a young adult, but also being in a space that is so Black and is so much culture, you know, like, so I don't know if y'all have been here, but I mean, everyone knows about the culture of New Orleans at this.
Right, right.
You're having memories like, oh yeah, I remember New Orleans.
Oh yeah,
I've been there one or two times.
Yeah, we've been there a few times.
Yeah, it's a place that really,
Mm.
I think because the people here are so authentically themselves, as y'all know, since you've been here,
Mhm.
it pushes you to really push past like this fake facade because people are
Yes.
honest here, that it really pushes you to sit with yourself. And I just really appreciate the honesty and the authenticity of this city, because it almost forces you to be the same, you know, like to catch up, because people here, they're gonna tell you how it is, you know, whether that's your food is nasty or, you know, you're not having a good time, like what's going on. So that's the other reason that I kind of felt drawn and, you know, continue to like be here. And this is also how I found Beloved. So
Okay. Wow.
yeah, it's a good place. Good place. I mean, I don't like to be the spokesperson, you know, of like everyone should just move down here. Because there's a difference between I tell this to my friends and they're like, Kevin, I want to like move down there, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there's a difference between visiting New Orleans and living in New Orleans.
Yes,
Like,
it is.
those are not the
With
same.
anything,
Like,
yeah.
I'm here for a weekend is not the same as living here. So
Right, without a doubt, yeah. Because all the good, because in the weekend you can miss all the bad stuff.
yeah,
if there be any.
that's correct. That's
So
right.
so let me take a detour, and then we prepped you before we got started. So aside from what we talked about earlier, is there something that you discovered that your mother didn't prepare you for on your journey?
Yeah, I think something that came to mind when y'all asked me that question was definitely around mental health and taking care of my mental health for sure. I think that you know, one of the things is for a lot of Black folks, like we don't always prioritize it, you know, for whatever reason. It could be the stigma around even saying the words mental health. When we know that for a lot of our families, we have like this trauma that's been passed down, you know, so whether we like it or not, right? Our mental health is how we survive in a country like this when we've had to endure so much. And so I think that's something that, you know, my mother didn't necessarily prepare me for. I think there were tools and affirmations and spaces that she put me in to be the person I am today. But I think what happens sometimes is because I was so involved in so many different things, I adopted this mentality of like, I always have to strive for excellence. Like things had to be perfect. And so I think that was like a byproduct off of my own stuff, you know, that I had to work through growing up and now like, you know, being actively in therapy and stuff like that, just based off of my own, like, this is more proactive than it is reactive, right? At this point.
Okay.
But yeah, I think just like as a Black person, especially like sometimes like when we're kids or whatever, we adopt like this perfectionism mentality that like everything needs to be perfect. Like we need to be best. We need to beat out everybody because people are already looking down on us kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that had like an adverse effect for me specifically. I can't talk for anybody else. So I think just preparing me for, or not necessarily preparing me for how to come out of that. We've had conversations since, and now that I'm an adult and we're like, okay, my mom is seeing me as like an adult and stuff like that. So we're able to have more conversations about that now. But yeah, I think just like how do you really, you know, take control and be proactive with taking care of yourself and not viewing that as a weakness, not viewing investing in your mental health, whether that's self-care, whether that is spiritual, right? Spiritual investment, whether that's emotional wellness, taking time for yourself, setting boundaries, you know, how do you do all that, you know? And that's something that I'm still working through, you know, at this point in my life. So yeah, I think just like the ability to really push back against everything needs to be so perfect and everything needs to be so excellent because for whatever reason, just really like, especially after the past 2 years of us all living in this pandemic, I think we've all seen just how important mental health is as like the glue that really holds everything else together. Because if your mental health is messed up, you stop, you check out of work, you know, you burn out, you stop engaging in the spiritual practices that you probably lifted you up, you stop getting out of bed, you know? And so yeah, I would just say that definitely like preparing for like the mental weight of what it means to try to like learn how to adult. Like, I don't know.
I know it. It seems like after we leave high school, we just pushed into that adultness and we're like, oh my goodness. But you know, we've had several guests on here that also were proactive in getting that mental health straight. We had David Johnson, he was in California, and you know, he said because there's that stigma against of going to see a therapist. You know, they outside of God, you know what I'm saying? And he was just saying how, you know, being able to talk to someone that can really be objective is definitely good therapy for him.
Right.
Yeah.
We had
Right.
other folks that's
Yeah, we
on
have,
here saying the same thing, and they're young people, and like you say, they're proactive in getting themselves together.
Yeah.
'Cause I think I was just gonna say, I think what we're starting to learn, I think for a lot of us is that like God, Christianity,
Mhm.
spirit can coexist, right? When there are people on this earth that have been appointed, right, designated to
Yeah,
serve in
yes.
a way, you know, like serve in a way to really help, right, people work through
Mhm.
difficult things. And so I think you know, like I think we're reaching a place, have reached a place where we're just seeing that like all of this can exist at the same time. Like
Right.
therapy doesn't cancel out God for a lot of people,
There
right?
you go. Mhm.
And so like I appreciate that there have been other guests that have been able to talk really openly about like
Oh
their
yes.
relationship. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, right. Because I think your generation has figured out that it's okay.
Mm,
You know,
mhm.
my generation, it wasn't okay. And in
Yeah.
some circles, it's still not okay. Because especially being a black man, you got a certain persona that you have to have. And so
Mm,
so there can't be any kinks in the armor at all. Because if the family sees a kink in your armor, then what does that bode for the family? And so I think now it's like you see that there is a kink, and if you don't get it buffed out, then it's going to
yes.
be doomed for the family.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can't take care of yourself, you know, you can't take care of the other people in your life. And I think, and that's the kind of conversation, and that's why I appreciate you talking about like the generational differences, because even in the conversations I've been able to have with my mother now, I'm like, cause she didn't have she's in the same generation, right, where it was stigmatized. But I think the way that she is really evolved and grown and talked about openly with me about like, Kevin, you need to take care of yourself. Like, how are you taking time off of work, you know? And to me, that's good parenting. You know, I don't know if my mom
Mhm.
was watching, but mom, yeah, that's the kind of parenting that I think a lot of us need as Black men, as
Yes.
Black
Mhm.
boys. Is like, look, um you can't show up in a way to where you're protecting other folks or however you want to, you know, exist in the family. You can't show up in that way if you're not taking care of yourself first. And
You're
so
right.
I think it's just because of the way that I think I'm able to have my parents hold me accountable, you know, at
Yeah.
this point in my life to that's been really, really helpful,
Oh
Right.
yeah.
Well,
regardless of the
Mhm.
generational
right.
differences.
Right. I think that, when you get on the airplane, they say if the mask comes down, put your mask on first.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
I guarantee you that my generation, especially the mothers, will say that when the mask come down, put yours on first, then you help everybody else. And then when the mask drops down, they're going to put yours on first and then put theirs on.
Mm,
Because even though we know that's the right thing to do, we're still programmed
programmed, yeah.
to be the protectors and defenders of those that are coming after us.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that they're all right.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of my peers feel that we've had our chance,
Mhm.
and so we're in cruise control right now. So we want to make it as easy for your generation, to have what we didn't have.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we recognize that we might not have took care of our mental health. We're gonna make sure you take care of yours.
Yes.
Mhm.
But
I love
that,
that.
yeah, that's the Black experience though.
Yes, it is.
Is
Yes,
that
it
is that we make our mistakes, but we try our best not to let those come after us make the same ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what it means to, you know, care for each other. Like when
Yeah.
you talk about, you know, caring for each other as Black people, and like really being invested in our communities, invested in our schools, invested in our youth, invested in
Mhm.
our elderly. Like it means that we are able to have these kind of conversations that are very open and also very instructive, right? Like this is what I've experienced. How do we keep up with the times and make sure that you're prepared with how the world is changing? Because I'm not growing up at the time that my parents were growing up in, you know, and they're not my age right now. And so I think there's like this shared sort of like wisdom that can happen of like,
yeah.
because of our relationship. And so I just really appreciate, anytime that, my elders, particularly like Black elders, are caring for me in a way that feels very like, okay, I'm just saying I want the best for you, or like I don't want you to go necessarily down this path, even though we're having different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take care of you regardless. And I just want to make sure that you're set up, mentally, emotionally, physically, for live a long life, And so, yeah, I think just what you're speaking to is like this intergenerational, I think we need to have more intergenerational conversations.
Yeah.
That show that we still care for each other as Black people. Because,
Exactly.
the media tries to make it seem like we all hate each other. And like,
oh yes.
But no, I think there's a definitely an ethic of care here,
Right.
with our communities for sure.
Well, I tell you, the majority of the guests we've had on here, because this is show 66 or something.
Oh wow.
But the majority of our guests have been millennials. And then we have, people in our generation, because we see the strides that you guys are making to make this place better. All of us, and the things when we said, oh, I can't do it, y'all say, well, why can't I do it?
I know.
Yeah.
Like you were saying the opportunities you didn't think existed, but then at the end of the day, you still went ahead and took a chance.
I know.
Yeah.
And some of us didn't take that chance.
I know. Fear for me, but anyway.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and all of those reasons are valid. I think from the millennial perspective, is also understanding that the barriers I think that folks before me experience, I might not necessarily. And so I think there's also like this end of like, how do I take that wisdom, right? But also understanding that a lot of y'all have very valid reasons for not taking advantage of something or doing something, because different times, different contexts.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I love that y'all have had so many different like sorts of people like sharing their perspectives, and millennials, clear, because I think you're absolutely right. We often push back or ask like, well, why can't we do it?
I know.
I think, a lot of times what we need is the or what some of us don't need it, some of us don't desire it, but like that encouragement to say, yeah, why not? Because some older folks might try to stop us from reimagining this or thinking about something differently, but the folks who are actually like supporting, right, and actually saying, you know what, you're right, we might have did it this way back then, but there's no reason why you shouldn't take
no.
And yeah, that's I think that's what really like helps us move forward,
And I'm looking at some of my friends now with their smaller ones. They already like you said, one of her son is only 4, and he already has 2 books on stocks.
Oh wow.
Budgeting.
Budgeting.
He got YouTube videos. And,
not the 4-year-old about to take out a 401k already. Like, we gotta let kids be kids. I get we're trying to protect them, but we gotta let kids be kids.
We started off and said he already. But I'm just, and another thing, we had a person on, one of our cousins, shining. I mean, I've never seen so many doctors, Black folks with PhDs that are young and out there making policies or being in there with these. I'm just elated. I'm telling you.
Well, see, we had a special event for us, because throughout our whole life, for the first time in history, we had a president that was younger than us. See, that had never happened before. And at the same time, we had never had a Black president, and so it was all the same thing. Because when Obama became president, it was funny. We were celebrating that we were finally African American president, and then it occurred to me when they were talking about him being swearing in. Wait a minute, I'm older than him.
Right.
It was like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, so, it was like a whoa moment.
Yeah, that was another wake up call. Like, wow. So times are changing, but the fact that we're still here and able to experience and enjoy it is the big deal to me. So let me ask you another question. And so in all the work that you've been doing with the beloved community and the diversity and inclusion things at the schools, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned?
I think one of the biggest lessons, wow, that's a good question. Out of all this work that I've been doing, I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is that I think one, I'll just do two good things. One is that it really takes people to make all of this happen. I think especially like in organizations, sometimes we jump straight to like, I want results, or I want like the outcome to be met, deadlines got to be met, this, we want to do this, we want to do that. And sometimes the people come last. And that's how we see so much burnout. But really, what we talk about at Beloved so much is that people are the reasons why we have seen so many of the changes that we were just discussing. So leaving people out of what you do, leaving relationship building out of your equity work is always going to fail. And I think that goes for a lot of different types of work, you know, is that I've learned about so much about the importance of people organizing together, the capacity of people to really change policies in a way to where, like you were just saying, like we are seeing such an increase, particularly in Black women with PhDs, Black women that are becoming doctors. Like all of this is possible. And so we can't really drive change. We can't do a lot of what we're trying to do in terms of making this world a better place if our policies, if our practices, if what we're doing in our workplaces are not centering people, you know, people's humanity is not going to work. And I think the second thing that I've learned a lot about is, and I'm still, you know, thinking about this in my work and also my personal life, I think what's at the core of what a lot of people desire is just freedom and liberation, right? Like the freedom to be able to exist, the freedom to be able to make the changes that you want to make, the freedom to be able to be yourself in whatever context, either that's workplace or in communities, the freedom to, you know, to feel free from trauma, right? And traumatizing experiences. I think so much of what I hear in terms of people not taking advantage of opportunities, even in my own case, or instances of conflict, instances where we're not hearing each other, a lot of it is fear-based, you know, like so many of us are afraid of consequences or afraid of what could happen if things change, afraid to speak up at work. And I just learned that if so many of our decisions are fear-based, then how can we really grow? Like, how can we really progress? How can we really, you know, for instance, say that we have faith, you know, faith and fear, feel very conflicting. And so I've just been thinking a lot about, you know, this idea of like, what does it really mean to create this world where people feel liberated and free from fear? Because at the core of racism, right, why race was even constructed, why racism was even constructed was out of fear of difference, out of fear of losing power, out of fear of people overtaking me. And so because I have seen that at the fear of like these white supremacy groups that have organized, you know, in the past couple of years, it's all fear, right? Fear of my race being eradicated, as irrational as that sounds. But again, because fear is at the core of so much hate and so much division, I really wonder what it means to create this world of freedom where people no longer feel like they have to be afraid, regardless of what your identity is. And so, yeah, those are the two, I think, the lessons I'm still wrestling with, I'm still grappling with, I'm still trying to kind of figure out, you know, in my journey with equity work is like, how do we get to this liberated state where we can feel free and, you know, rest and, you know, leave some space for joy.
Right.
But also just learning that, you know, people need to be at the core of what we're doing organizationally at all times. We really want to like make some change. So yeah, I'll share those two things. I think that's something that definitely I've learned over the years.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Because you know what a lot of people don't realize, and especially those that consider themselves to be Christian, is that what God desires for us is relationships. Our whole existence is built on relationships,
community.
Right. And so and fear is not fear as we understand it. is not at the center of it, although that's what we put there. And fear is that type of fear is put there by people who want to keep us out of relationship. And so to your point, that's what we need. We need to put people at the forefront of what we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and take self out of the pictures as much as we do.
Love, love, love. If we could just have more love, I'm telling you.
Yeah, love is practical.
Right. So
real thing.
It is. But the ones who want, the ones, the other folks, their fear, like you were saying also, is that they don't want to lose their power, whatever they think whatever they think that is.
Yeah.
Right.
And then so they convince other folks that we're trying to take their spot in line.
Yep.
Look at Ukraine.
Yeah. It's a scarcity mindset. It's a scarcity. There's not enough to go around. And so, having an abundance mindset minus fear, and all of that, then we don't have to feel like our power is being taken away, whatever that irrational fear, means. But, everything you do, when I think about people-centered, I think about how everything we do needs to be centered in love, because love is an action, right? Like love is an action. It's practical. It's not this theoretical. It just exists in the sky. Like love is really an ethic. Is really practical. If your decisions are really rooted in how you love people, then that's how you get to equity. Because the reason why we have inequitable policies is that they're not rooted in love. They're rooted in power. They're rooted in power. They're rooted in exploitation. But if you say that you love people, and you mean that, then you'll do the work that it takes to build this world where people have what they need, which is equity. And then when you advocate for that, now they've come up with this dirty word, socialism. Helping other people. Ooh, that's socialism. We don't want that. So now you take people who always thought that in their mind that they were fair people, that they loved people, that they cared about other folks, but now it's socialism, and we can't have anything that resembles socialism here in these United States. And the sad part, like you were saying, people got that mindset that there's not enough to go around. That's being spread by the people who control 90% of everything. They have everything.
They have everything.
And that's why they ain't enough to go around, because you won't give up none of what you got.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's spread the fear. Let's call things all kinds of things if it meets the objective of shutting people down.
Right. Name calling.
Well, like you said, we all have our own definition of love. It's not God's definition. It's just ours.
Right. But ultimately, what you said is the bottom line. People need to understand: love is an action. It's not an emotion. It's an action.
Yeah,
that's what the Lord said.
It's not an emotion, because emotions change, but love is an action. It's an everyday choice. Like I love that book, Everything About Love, because it just talks about how love is an action. It's deliberate. It's intentional. It's a choice. You can choose not to love or not to act in a loving way. But emotions are fleeting. Emotions are fleeting, but love is something that you really choose and decide to engage in. Every choice, from the way you speak to people, from the way you don't speak to them, from the way that from the way you just exist. So
exactly.
Not an emotion.
That's right.
Not at all.
That's what I said. Not of this love.
So what's next for you? What are your long range, short range plans?
I think short range is just continue to try to be authentic in the work that I do, whatever that means. Like, how do I show up every single day in this work in an authentic way, in a way that feels like I am impacting people based off of the work that we do. So I think short term is to continue to really sit with myself, make sure that I still feel good about what I'm doing at the end of the day, and I make sure that whenever I engage in the work, it feels purposeful. So that's short term is something that I'm always thinking about in terms of this work, is just making sure that like I feel congruent, that I feel like my actions and what I state to be my values are like this in this work. So that short term is like keeping my work with beloved, like that's my job. And I think long term, I have thought about school potentially being sort of like a distant goal of like, okay, how do I take my lived experience and like what I'm noticing and maybe translate it into teaching, and like really thinking about like some more org change management culture, because I'm just really passionate about this workplace stuff. Like I feel like so many people go to work hating it, and dealing with things they don't have to deal with. So
And that's
I
why
think
we don't have them going to work now.
right.
Everybody
Yeah,
keep on thinking they just because they lazy, but no.
people are burnt out. People are tired. People are tired of work. People are tired of working in toxic environments.
Yes.
And they're tired, and with reason. And so that's what I'm thinking long term is like, okay, how can I, in a small way, impact that a little bit, but from like an equity lens, because people are quitting jobs left and right. I mean, they won't even have a job lined up, but they're like, I'm sick of this. I'm sick. We spend all day at work and I hate it. So I want to like dive into that more like longer term in some capacity. I haven't figured that out yet.
Right. Yeah, because right, and I hadn't even thought about that until you just said it. Really, because that's another thing that the pandemic did. It gave people time to step away from their jobs, their work, and then realize how much better their quality of life was when they didn't have to deal with that every day.
Every day, yeah.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that.
That's absolutely right. People came back and was like, I actually don't have to deal with this.
I don't deal with this. Yeah, I don't want to deal with this.
I ain't never seen so many advertisements for work at home situations, and I don't have to go into there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but and I understand it, because the last 5 years I was at my job, I felt the same way. Yeah, I can't wait till I can retire, because I couldn't stand it anymore. It was just ridiculous. The stuff that I saw that I had to deal with on a daily basis. I made a mistake going into management, and so the stuff that I saw from above me, but also the stuff I saw from the people below me. It was like I don't need this in my life. Yeah,
it affects your quality of life for sure.
Yeah. So with that point, we're gonna ask you this last. I'm gonna ask you last question to see if Tina had anything for you. What is it that you like to do in your downtime?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Okay. Y'all on the same page. In my downtime, so I'm a runner. I was literally just running yesterday. So I like to run. And that's another thing about living here is that like up there, I probably can go months, because Detroit has winter, and I'm not trying to, my track coach used to make us run in the snow, but I'm not going to do that willingly now. So the good thing about like living down here is like the weather is pretty much consistent year round, like anywhere between 50 and 80. So I do a lot more running in my downtime, like at the parks through the French Quarter. Downtime also involves like I have this poodle that I have. So like he just runs me ragged anytime that he can. So a lot of my downtime is also like running after him. Yeah, dogs are children. I don't know if people feel.
We got one.
Okay, yeah. And mine is a godsend to me, though. Yeah, every time I look at it, it's like, oh God watching me.
I love that you have positive feelings towards your dog, because sometimes my puppy just drives me like, I mean, just every move I make, he's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?"
That's it. And she's my protector. She just, she don't even want nothing coming near me.
I love that though. Like my dog is definitely not a protector. He's scared of a lot. He an anxious little puppy. He only won. So yeah, running after him and just doing a lot of outdoor activities lately.
Okay.
It's festival season in New Orleans. So a lot of my downtime is also just like exploring the city. Even though I've been here for 5 years, there's always something going on, always something to learn. And so, yeah, a lot of my downtime is also just like trying new restaurants. Like I went on for fun, started trying out different restaurants that had char-grilled oysters to kind of see, like, to start my oyster list. So I like to start like lists of like, okay, this restaurant has the best this restaurant has the best this. So
Okay.
a lot of my downtime also is spending a lot of my money
Right.
going to these restaurants, because 5 years later, I still actually have not been to that many. So yeah, a lot of my downtime is like in the city and
Okay.
trying out these businesses, these restaurants, you know, and ranking them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you
Sound
might
good.
wind up doing your little blog later on, a little restaurant blog.
Right. I'm like, let me make a little money, you know.
Not only that, we'll call you when we there and say, hey, which one is the
Right.
this, that, and the other?
Yeah, send you the list. I got you.
Right. Okay, that's good.
Oh, Kevin, it's been definitely wonderful.
Right.
Thank you so
Very
much.
informative.
Right, without a doubt. And so the last thing is it anything that you want to leave the listeners with? Any thought?
Well, first I want to say thank y'all for inviting me to y'all platform.
Thank
I
you
think
for
having 60 plus episodes is like amazing.
It is.
Like, that's about what 5 years worth of podcasts. Like, so it's definitely been a pleasure talking to y'all. I mean, I guess the only thing that I can really leave is, I mean, sometimes people are like, you know, why do you talk about this stuff so much? Or like, why, like, do we always have to talk about race? And I would say, like, I think that don't ever, I guess, be afraid or like hesitant to talk about things that bother you when it comes to these, like, you're never, because I hear this from, you know, a lot of folks, is that I feel like I might be doing too much, especially in the workplace, like was that a microaggression? Like that kind of hurt my feelings when they said they wanted to touch my hair, you know, the things that we had to experience daily. I would say never second guess, right, what you know intuitively when someone does something, right, that crosses a boundary, or when they try to shut you down for bringing up something about your story, about your narrative, about what you're experiencing. Never feel hesitant to do that, because I promise you'll probably feel a lot better, right, when you see what's happening and you make a decision to leave and find a place that will affirm you, because it is possible. It takes a lot of work sometimes to find that place and to find those leaders who will cultivate that space for you. But I think so many times we're afraid to be honest with our story, to be honest with our experiences, to talk about race, to talk about equity, to talk about access, out of fear that we're making white people uncomfortable or making people uncomfortable, you know? And so what I always encourage is, even if it feels scary, or even if it feels, you know, whatever, not that it's your responsibility, but a lot of times when we're speaking up, we're making that place better for the people that are coming after us, that now they don't have to speak on it. You know, that's what we mean when we talk about what you all were talking about earlier, is like this generational thing, or like, how do we care for each other? A lot of times, sometimes it takes us being, unfortunately, sometimes it does take us being the one to open that door for conversation. So I just want to say, for the people who, you know, do experience some things of harm, or like feel some kind of way about things that are happening, don't ever second guess that, like, your voice is impactful, that it is making space for other people to also have that voice, so that way you don't have to suffer, you know, in silence. So that's all I'll say, because I also had to have that conversation of like not second guessing what I know to be true or what I believe.
Right, that's right. And you know, and the last thing I saw they do when you paint a cup up, I'm amazed that you still had to deal with somebody talking about, like, can I touch your hair?
Well, yeah, they still, I mean, some people don't even ask. But yeah, the whole hair, the whole, like, you know, when people have braids one day and then they might have their natural hair
the next day.
You know, like that still happens, I mean, maybe not as much virtually. You know, but people are back in work. But yeah, it's still a thing that people have to do.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. And so they get offended when you get offended.
Yeah.
But
I don't even understand that.
Right. But you want to treat us like a pet, a doll, a toy or something. And then you get offended when we don't like it. That's amazing to me.
Yeah. Or if I were to touch your dog without permission.
Your dog, not you. Look, not you, your dog.
Yeah, not you. Now, if I were to touch your dog and scratch him without your permission, it would be a problem. But you can just go all in the afro. All right.
The struggle is still real.
Still
Yes.
real. Yeah.
It's still real.
All right, Kevin. Well, thank you for coming on. We really enjoyed you, and you left some good nuggets, some things that for people not to just think about, but to act on.
Mhm.
You know, I think that's what's important,
Yeah.
and we pray that your journey gets a little easier.
No, it's good. I'm full of joy. My journey has not been easy, but it's there now. I'm here.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Right. That's right. Well, as long as you still got that joy, right?
Mhm. That's right. Keep that passion.
That's what Pastor Jay
Sure.
said.
Actually, you say that all the time.
All the time.
That's
all
all
the
right. The
time.
Lord will lead you.
She
You
wrote
on the
a
right
book.
path.
Look, she wrote a book and a song about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
All right. So you
Thanks,
take care.
y'all.
We thank you
All
for
right.
coming on.
Yes.
Tell the folks we
you.
said, hey, you probably.
Oh, definitely will. Definitely will.
Okay.
Thank you all so much.
All right now.
You're welcome, sweetie.
take
Have a
care
good
now.
one. Mm. Wonderful.